Hello, and welcome to Spring Break at the Movies. Yes, I am on spring break, meaning I can stay up as late as I want, sleep as late as I want, and have 5 days of no responsibilities except for all the work I have to do for class and portfolios and whatnot. Yeah. So right off the bat, I want to say that with this one, I don't have a dog in the fight. You know, I understand that this is a classic. I was about to do the thing, but I didn't. That, you know, this is a book that a lot of people really love. It's been around for a while. I know a lot of people really got into it as children. I never did. I never read it. And it's not one, it wasn't on the required cycle for me when I was in school, along with things like James and the Giant Peach or Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which they read to us every single frickin' year. But this one, if they did read it to us, I completely blanked it. So I know that a lot of people really love it. I know that it's got a place in a lot of people's psyches. So I cannot speak to this as an adaptation. I don't know how it worked. I don't know how well it brought the world to life that was in the book. All I can do is give you my impressions of it as a person with completely no knowledge. Like pretty much like any other movie. Just a complete novice. And I gotta say, from my vantage point, this movie doesn't work. This is a very boring, very tired, very not very well executed film. And for me at least, the root of the problem, I think this is going to be a short review because I don't have a whole lot to say, because I think the main issue with it is the acting and the directing of the acting. This film has some very good actors in it. It has at least 2 Oscar winners, in Reese Witherspoon and Oprah Winfrey. So it's got star power. It has people who can act. But there's a reason why certain actors are cast in certain films. Okay, let's use a kind of a comparable example. Let's look at the Harry Potter series. There is a reason those actors were cast in those roles. The way European actors and British actors are trained and the way they go about their business, they can make fantastic things, and scenarios and names and things that sound weird when you read them or when you hear them out loud. They can make those things seem natural and tangible. I mean, think about the Harry Potter series and think about some of the names and some of the things these people had to say. Just one that jumps to mind is Dumbledore. I mean, that is, and even Voldemort. I mean, these are not names that just roll trippingly off the tongue or that naturally have any kind of imposing or, menacing air about them. But the way in which these actors or those actors were able to portray it, it worked. It came across. You need that in a film like this. That's why Sir Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart were such important cast members to the first X-Men movie, because they could make all this stuff about mutants and people with weird code names and all that. They could make it sound plausible. That's not the case here. Not one of these actors sounds natural. Not one line delivery sounds like it could actually exist even in this fantastic fantasy world. Okay, let's look at a different example. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Gene Wilder could make the fantasy elements of this guy and his world feel tangible, feel real. So even though you knew you were seeing a fantasy, it felt still like something you could reach out and touch, or that could exist just by the way he described it. Not here. The acting is very presentational. They're trying to sound all ethereal and deep and, full of wisdom and all that, and trying to load everything down with such gravitas that not one line from any actor, except one, ironically, and I'll talk about that in a second, that not one line or one delivery felt like it was an actual line of dialogue. It felt like they were performing in a school play. No offense to school plays, I direct them. But, it really did feel like a bunch of kids standing up on stage going, and now we will do this. We will tesseract to the magical place. I'm over-exaggerating. It wasn't that bad of acting, but, here's a way to gauge it, and this is a real backhanded compliment. If Chris Pine is the most natural actor and gives the most believable performance, I think you might have a problem. And I say that ironically with a lot of, gotta give Chris Pine some props, who I always chop down. I don't think he's a good actor. But here I feel like he gave a very natural and very realistic performance, and the film sorely needed it. They needed something to provide an anchor for all of the, all the weird shit. And I think he did a very good job of that. And again, this is not me saying that any of these actors are bad. It's just there are certain things that certain actors are good at and certain things certain actors aren't good at. And, like, for instance, I don't think any of the child actors in this were bad. I don't think they were bad actors. I feel like they just didn't sound like there was any kind of actual emotional connection to anything that was going on. And there's a lot, so that's the main problem with this film, is it doesn't feel grounded. It doesn't feel natural. And yes, I know it's a big fantasy world, and it's supposed to be about leaving your expectations behind and all that nonsense. I get that. But if you don't have some kind of anchor, some kind of focal point that feels real, then the fantasy world is just that. It's just a picture, and that's not what a movie is supposed to do. I mean, think about Wizard of Oz. That film was very big and very bold. It was a 1930s musical. But Judy Garland, even with her kind of a little bit over the top performance, was such a natural and sympathetic presence that it created that anchor, even amongst the Technicolor wizardry and the singing and dancing scarecrows and whatnot. And this film needed that, and it didn't get it. None of it felt connected. There are other issues but everything kind of stems from that. I got to say this, and I don't normally get on this here. The costume design for this was awful. I hated, they put Reese Witherspoon when you first meet her. She's in this weird white, shapeless, formless thing. It looked like someone took a gob of wedding cake and threw it at her and it stuck. She couldn't move in it. She was trying to move and walk, and it didn't work. Mindy, what's her name there? I can never remember her last name, and I apologize. Playing Mrs. Who, they put her in a dress where she's running down this hill, and they put her in a dress where all these CGI butterflies are flipping around her, and she clearly can't move her legs. And so she's bobbing along, and it just looks ridiculous. So the costume design was not good. I'm certainly not trying to appeal for this film to be longer than it was, because it was already long enough and boring enough. But it also feels like we're missing some vital scenes of character development and whatnot right there at the very beginning. It feels like there's a lot of stuff. Nobody reacts to anything in a natural way in this. And again, maybe that's how they reacted in the book, so I'm not trying to... But I'm just saying, for a film, nobody reacted to anything naturally. Like, very early on, Reese Witherspoon's character, Mrs. What's-It, and I'm not making that up, that's the character's name, like, shows up in these people's house because the little boy, Charles Wallace, and God, what an annoying name. I got so tired of hearing, Charles Wallace! Charles Wallace! Charles Wallace! Charles Wallace! Like, just call him Charles or something! God, it's so irritating. Anyway, so she just shows up in the house and is talking all this weird stuff, and the two kids' mother is just like, okay, you need to get out of the house. And she leaves, and, like, there's no, like, freaking out. There's no, like, there's like, a weird woman just danced around our living room for about 5 minutes, and, well, okay, let's make sure we lock the doors from now on. There's no natural reactions to anything. And again, I know that it's supposed to be a fantasy movie, but still. And I guess because it's a fantasy movie, I guess a lot of people are thinking, well, the visuals are supposed to save it. You're not supposed to worry about it. Don't worry about the visuals. The visuals are boring as shit. Have you seen Avatar? Have you seen Thor? Have you seen any movie within the last 15 to 20 years? Then all the visual effects in this you've seen. It's the same boring crap. And this, nothing in this is visually interesting or stunning, because you're looking, it's like, oh, computer. All right. Gotcha. Guys in front of a green screen. Whatever. There's this one part where Reese Witherspoon turns into this giant floating plant thing, and she looks exactly like the Tooth Fairy from that Rise of the Guardians movie a few years back. I hate to always bring this up because I realize this doesn't answer everything, and I think CGI does a good job in certain places. But you're creating this fantasy world. And while I'm watching, all I can think of is, what would this have looked like if they'd gone to the Henson Creature Shop and had them create some of these creatures and some of these visuals that we were supposed to be seeing? How much cooler would that have been? At least for me. And again, I'm a Henson guy. So maybe it wouldn't have been cool for everybody. For me, I would have gotten behind it. Yeah, I mean, it just... It's just been done. And I feel like the film was trying. And I think if you have young kids, this might be something they really... Okay, here's a good part. I'll admit this. There's this really intense moment where the big kind of outer space monster, they call it the It, where, it possesses Charles Wallace, and he's dragging the three heroes down the hallway towards, the big monster. And that is shot and staged and everything very intense. Like, it's something out of a horror movie. It looks pretty, like, even I'm sitting there going, whoa, okay, this is kind of creepy. So that little sequence worked very well. And there were smatterings of things here and there. I'm not trying to say it was all bad. And again, if you have young kids, this could be their Wizard of Oz. This could be their whatever. But I got to come from the frame of reference from which I have, and then I'm, sadly, as of a 39-year-old man who has seen a lot of these things, there's nothing new here. There's nothing interesting here. There's nothing, earth-shattering here that, nothing worth the build-up and the hype that this book, when I hear people talk about it, I think it's kind of like that Ender's Game movie that came out not so long ago. you know, it's one of those kind of staples of a lot of people's childhoods, and, you know, it's this book that supposedly set the stage for all this other stuff, but it's been so long and so many other things that have either pilfered ideas from it or stolen them outright have come along that nothing is interesting or shocking or a revelation. It's kind of like, you know, kids of my generation watching Psycho for the first time. You don't really get the same visceral reaction that people who saw it in the theaters originally got, because it's been parodied so much. I saw so many Psycho parodies on The Simpsons that when I actually went and watched the movie, I already knew what was coming, so it didn't scare me. So that's kind of what I felt watching this, is that maybe if this is your first exposure to some of this stuff, so again, younger kids, then maybe you get more out of it than I do. But for anybody else, been there, done that, seen it done better. So I can't in good conscience, you know, recommend this. So I don't know where else to go with this. So final grade for A Wrinkle in Time, I gotta go D. The visuals were not interesting. The acting was poorly directed. The delivery of everything just didn't work. I think, again, no bad actors here. I think the three young actors especially did as good a job as they could with what they had, but it just wasn't enough. It just didn't work. So, again, if this was your most favoritist thing growing up, or you just love this book, sorry. You know, maybe, again, hopefully you get more out of it than I did. But for me, yeah, D is the grade on this one. So, boy howdy, this 2018 is not shaping up to be good for the movies. It's been a chore, I gotta say. Hopefully there's some fun stuff coming down the pike. Hopefully we'll get a few more diamonds in the rough. You know, you gotta keep hope alive. You know, you gotta keep fighting. So, got a couple other ones I'm going to try to see before school starts back up again. I hopefully will start on the upswing. So, thanks for watching. For Chewy and Mr. Chirpy, let me say, drive safe, and we'll see you at the movies.